I'm just refreshing. Okay. The part is always a bit awkward while you're waiting for it to come in. So we are officially live in YouTube. So hi everyone, how's everyone doing? So welcome to another session, another meeting of Product Time Madrid. Again, even though lockdown and restrictions have been I'll here around in Spain, we decided to maintain the format. So in order to being able to invite world class speakers to our little community and celebrate their knowledge, their experience, and be able to share a little time with them. Today we are honored to have Tami Reiss and Denise Tiles. I do hope I pronounced the surnames correctly. Tami and Denise are product thought leaders with incredible experience in their backs, and they currently work at Products Labs. They are colleagues of Melissa Perry, which, as you know, is another reference in the product world, and the writer of one of the product Bibles, Escape the Build Trap, which many of us have read. Again, thank you very much for being here with us today. Denise and Tami are going to talk about two different topics, which are extremely important these days. They are topics that have to do with how the conversation about product has evolved and has become more sophisticated and is providing more focus and more detail to the craft. So we're going to talk about product strategy and about product operations. Hi, Denise. Hi, Tami.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome, everybody.
If you want to say something about yourselves or whatever, and if not, we can just jump in and into the conversation.
I'll introduce myself before I start talking. I'll let Denise go first.
Sure. Hi, I'm Denise Tillis. I'm with Products Labs. I'm the VP of Product, and I've been really digging into product operations over the past year and a half, and I'm really excited to share what we've seen in the industry and what we've seen in our experience. And I'll get a little more in depth on my background, but I've been at Products Labs for about a year now. And prior to that, I was at a startup called Understood, which was a nonprofit. And before that, I was at a company called Cision, a SaaS company, for about 4 years. And prior to that, Condé Nast in media. So The New Yorker, Allure, Vogue. And I've also been an educator. So I'm really excited to speak to you today.
Beautiful. Okay, Tami, you want to chime in or
I was going to introduce myself during my segment, but hi, I'm Tami. I've got 15 plus years of experience in product management and leadership. I lead our product strategy practice at Products Labs. So I work with companies to help them figure out what to do next. And I am also what's known as the CPO in residence at Insight Partners through our relationship with Products Labs. And so I help growth stage CPOs, VPs of product, learn how to scale their organizations from an organizational perspective, as well as how to choose the right strategy that will be leading to growth. That's me. Oh, I'm also the founder of Just Not Sorry, which Federico uses on his computer, which is exciting. Something I built as a present to the world in 2015 that pops up on your Gmail to tell you you're using language that diminishes your message, and it's used by like 500,000 people. That's me.
Okay, beautiful. So yes, everyone knows we're going to have one conversation after the other, and we'll leave the Q&A for both presentations, for both talks at the end. Okay. So, okay. So Denise, I believe you go first.
Yes. Let me go ahead and everyone look away. Don't look at my screen yet. I just got to share quickly.
Yeah, we encourage people to ask questions. we're going to try to do our best to collect them and ask them at the proper time. So,
please. Great. Everybody hear me? We're good?
Yep.
Excellent.
good.
Excellent. So today we're gonna...
Sorry, Denise. I still have to get your screen.
Okay, good. I'll give you a second.
No. Like I still cannot see it. It is still not shared.
Okay, hang on. Oh, yes, you're right.
There we go.
Now look away from my screen.
Yes.
Great. We good?
We're good. So now it's plugged in, and I'm gonna slowly take all of us out, but for you. So whenever you want, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. So thank you all for joining today. I'm really excited to talk about product operations. I've had experience with product operations as an operator, working at a number of companies, and it really impacted the way I worked and the successes I had. So I'm really excited to share more about that with you. So let's get started. So a little bit about me. I already mentioned I've been at Products Labs for about a year now, working with B2B companies like Medidata and Cytel, life sciences companies. I've also was the VP of Product at Cision, the SaaS communications tech platform. And I managed a product line that earned about $180 million a year. And the company was part of an acquisition with private equity. And it was really when I sort of understood the power of product operations. When we were brought into the portfolio, a former competitive product of ours was now under my management. And trying to understand what I was dealing with and how to create a product family that didn't cannibalize the business from either the low-cost product or the high-cost product. We needed a lot of data at our fingertips to really understand what we were dealing with. And luckily, I had a product operations team. We didn't really call it that then, but we had a products operations team, 2 data analysts, and we had a lot of good data available on the product I had been managing. The product, the lower cost product that I took on, the former competitor, there was nothing. It really, they couldn't parse out volume. They couldn't look at revenue or pipeline. There was nothing there. So it really opened my eyes to the power of product operations. So after a lot of digging and manual work in terms of getting those data points together, we were able to put together a cogent strategy for sort of a good, better, best of a product suite. And that was thanks to product operations. So it was really a unique moment to sort of compare what good looks like with product operations and how painful it can be when you don't have that enabled at your organization. Prior to Cision, as I mentioned, I was at a Condé Nast, so working at the New Yorker and some other brands like Allure. And before that, I was at a company called Understood, which is a nonprofit media resource for parents with kids with learning disabilities. And I've taught at New York University over the years as well. So let's talk about products. So let's talk about Products Labs first. So there's we're sort of a 3-pronged approach under Melissa Perry. So we have the Product Institute. Some of you may be familiar with that. It's an online learning center to level up your own product management expertise. We've just introduced the CPO Accelerator, and Tami can talk a lot more about that when she speaks after me, but that's a program that's really combining education and mentorship and networking with other product leaders at the top. And then Products Labs is really the consultancy. So we come into enterprise level companies and really help to transform the product organization through product strategy, org design, and product operations, which leads us to why we're all here. So I'd love to know from you all, and I'm going to look at the comments here. What does product operations mean to you? Just add a couple of things in the chat. I'd love to see what everyone's perspective is. We'll give it about 30 seconds. What does products mean to you? Okay, we have one, how to set up and align a proper product strategy when the company is pretty much sales-led. Yep, for sure. That's definitely part of it. Help product teams be more efficient? Absolutely. Gathering data around the product? Yes. Really, I think what we're getting at here is enabling product teams to make the best decisions and have all of the data available to really create strategy. What's important here is that you want to be able to have all of the data points at your fingertips to be able to make solid decisions. And not only data points, but there's also other aspects of product operations as well, and we'll get into that next. So what is product operations? People have different definitions of it, but the way that we think about it at Products Labs is it's really almost that Venn diagram. It's the center of the Venn diagram. It's the intersection of the areas that work so closely with product. You've got customer success, engineering, sales is in there as well, and marketing. But the important thing is that product operations helps you set product strategy. You cannot set product strategy without good data. Good data is part of, and flowing data and data that's self-service. You cannot set product strategy without that. And we've been speaking to a number of leaders in the industry and product operations. And recently, Tami had actually spoken to the head of ProdOps at Calendly. And I love the way that he puts it. He says that product operations elevates the speed and quality of decision making. And I think that is perfect. That's exactly what it is. So the way we think about product operations at Product Labs is really 3 pillars, right? So you have business and data insights. You want to make sure you've got that data flowing in that you can help use for your strategy creation and making sure that the bets that you've made with your strategy are making sense. Customer and market insights, so making sure that you've got external research, flowing and organized in a way that doesn't fatigue your customers, and also makes the most of the insights that you do bring in terms of tagging, interviews that you've done, so it's available for other PMs to use, so you're not sort of reinventing the wheel each time. And then finally, the 3rd pillar is process and practices. So really making sure that you can scale value with consistent practices and frameworks. So let's go right into the business and data insights. So this is kind of rhetorical, but this is a sort of great way to think about how enabled your organization is today. So how many of you guys can really answer these questions today? Someone, let's say your CEO came up to you and asked you, which products and segments are the most profitable in your product? Could you answer that right away? Which features are driving sales and adoption by segment? Which products have the most sales debt? And by sales debt, I mean customer commits. What features or functionality has sales promised that you will deliver on? They may have promised that to close a sale or something like that. And then which customer segments have the best retention? You want to be able to, these are just a few of like many questions that you'd want to be able to answer, and you'd be amazed how many organizations and how many product managers aren't able to do that today. Or if they do, they are able to, it is probably 2 days of digging and putting together disparate inputs of data and reports to be able to answer those questions. Product operations in its most exciting and accessible form is really about the flow of that data. So when you think about the data, you want to be able to answer those key questions, right? You want to really have visibility into those metrics that matter. So, these are the areas really that are most central to your input needs. So you think about revenue and ARR, and what I mean by that is annual recurring revenue. So that's a good measurement of the health of a subscription business, because that's the amount of revenue that a company is expecting to repeat. So you can measure company product progress and really predict future growth there, right? With bookings, you want to be able to understand what's coming in, what's in the pipeline, and really see, what's coming ahead down the quarter, the next quarter, the quarter after that. When you think about retention, right, with churn, one of the companies that we worked with recently with Products Labs, we spoke to the product team and we were sort of getting a sense of their sort of the health of the product team. And they were so excited about how many new logos or new companies they were bringing in, the sales team was adding, but nobody had any visibility into retention. So they were churning almost the same number of customers as they were booking. So that's almost like sand falling between your fingers. You want to be able to have quick visibility into both. When you think about the engagement aspect of your product, one aspect would be support tickets by customer, right? Where the majority of support tickets happening is how are you parsing that out by product, by customer segment? And you want your teams prioritizing resources for support tickets on your most valuable clients if you need to prioritize. So sometimes the squeakiest customers are the loudest customers are the ones that generate the least revenue. So you want to make sure that you're really allocating those resources in a prioritized way. And then you think about activity costs. And what I mean by that is you think about onboarding customers. As the product gets more complex, the duration for training the trainers gets lengthened, and there's more internal sort of invisible costs as well. So you want to be able to track that as well, just to understand the full impact of what's happening with your product. And then really being able to segment all of that by product and package and bundle, the customer segment, the cohort, and the geography. So this is an example of a dashboard that we might create or help a company create to really understand primary drivers of revenue. And this might be available in a tool like Tableau or Looker. It could be done manually initially, and typically that's the sort of path that companies will take. They'll try to get all of that data they have in terms of revenue and business insights done manually. And that's a lot of work, but at least you understand the inputs that are coming. And then once you have all of that sort of set up and you have buy-in from your stakeholders, then you can start thinking about automating into Tableau or Looker. And we'll get into stakeholder management in a few minutes. But you want to be able to have a quick glance at your revenue health and your product health, right? So new bookings by product, number of feature requests, and then that's where you're sort of prioritizing by customer and how much revenue they're contributing. Your NPS and understanding by product how well they're doing, and then really being able to look at your annual recurring revenue and broken out even more in detail. So where's your new revenue coming from? What aspect of that is upsell and cross-sell? Where's your churn happening and downsell? And so we like to use what we call here as a revenue bridge, and it's really a helpful visualization to just really understand all of those revenue drivers. So pillar 2, we're going to do a quick look at. There's so much more to say about data and insights, but I want to make sure I give you guys just sort of the high level of all of the pillars that as we see them with product operations. So with customer insights, you really want to be able to be efficient, maximize your value. And a typical challenge could be with customers or users, different teams are trying to access the same users, right? And understand the same markets for research purposes. In my experience, sales can tend to position themselves as the gatekeepers to customers. So you want to be respectful and ensure that you're being very thoughtful about how you're accessing these customers and that you're tracking it and they're not being sort of emailed every week or every month to help gain a sales team buy-in and level of comfort with you having a smaller relationship with the customer, but you do need to speak to them. And then on the other side of that, sales and support, they're your ears on the ground. They're hearing feedback from the customers, and sometimes there may be some difficulty in getting that feedback back to the product team to make any changes. So what we think of when you want to solve those type of issues is a mechanism for sales just to give support feedback to make it to product. A couple of organizations I've worked at, we've made it very simple where you just sort of have a Slack channel. One place we had that just piped right into Jira. Not that it went into a sprint or anything like that, but it's just a more organized way to understand where this was coming from, and even some areas of prompts like what's the problem we're solving, what's the potential revenue, rather than I need this. In terms of accessing the same users, you really want to make sure that you've been very clear about the users that you want to talk to based on customer traits. If you're looking at reducing churn, you might know that in a company around real estate, it's the rental market that has more churn. So you want to be able to parse those by segment. The user load management, I mentioned that earlier, in terms of fatiguing customers that are willing to talk to you, not going to that well, as we say, too often, making sure that you're being very judicious about the time and effort that you take with these customers. And then you want to just make sure there's visibility into the findings you have with customer research to make sure everybody's empowered, right? So if the user experience team has some research they need to do, let them access the work that the product managers did, right? So everybody, the information is available for everybody. And in the same way, any sort of research that the UX team did, make sure it's tagged appropriately where product can access that as well. Airtable has a really great user research template, and I highly recommend it if you use Airtable or you're interested in getting more value out of your customer insights. So when you think about that aspect, you want to bring in all of those inputs from across the org, right? So you've got your revenue in terms of, that might come from a product like NetSuite. You want to get the financial P&L, any type of costs as well, Salesforce or some other CRM in terms of customer transaction and bookings, customer support data. So you want Zendesk piping in, a PX tool like Gainsight or Pendo, any sort of product engagement metrics that you're tracking, Jira in terms of workflow data, Bamboo, just to understand the number of people you have on your team if you're working out a research and, an R&D budget, understanding how much time has been spent on something, and then what's the revenue coming in on that product and being able to look at that. And then finally, a product like Hotjar that really, it's another opportunity in terms of storing the quantitative and qualitative user research, an alternative to Airtable. So the idea is to be able to pipe all of these in to one tool to be able to slice and dice in a way that's going to inform your strategy, help you understand the health of your product, the health of your business, and make proactive decisions, not reactive. And finally, we're going to talk about our processes and practices. This gets people really excited. I think that a lot of companies feel like, everybody could benefit from more, sort of processes, templates, ways of doing things. And I think as your company scales up, it becomes even more important. So I want to share a case study with you here. This was Athena Health, a healthcare company. They create cloud-based and on-prem solutions to track healthcare financials. An issue that they had, the product team and the sales team, was that the sales team was selling too far ahead of the product introduction. So that was creating all kinds of issues. So, once sales sells it and, you do your best to try to sort of fulfill that, but it's inevitably going to lead to some conflict and unfulfilled promises. In the case of Athena here, they had sat through a demo of a prototype and interpreted that, even though the product team kept saying, this is a prototype, this is not ready for release, they interpreted this like, we're going to get this in the next sprint. And they went out and sold it. They decided to sell this and landed a big client, but they, once they came back and said, hey, we've landed this really big client, this huge client, the product team said, well, we're not ready with that. That's still in prototype form. And like, well, we've got to hurry this up. How soon can we get this? We've landed this. So the product team thought, 6 months. 6 months came and went. 12 months came and went. A year and a half. And eventually the product team had to say, you know what? We cannot create the product in the way that it was created for this company, in the way that it was sold. So, realistically, we're still not going to be able to get this done. So it's you guys need you need to have a hard conversation about what we can do and the timeline. So, it sort of extended out by a year and a half, a conversation. that should have happened in the beginning, but had they had more good practices and better communication around when they can sell, this could have been avoided, right? So these customer commits on a grand scale can really impact what you want to deliver on with your strategy. But even smaller features and functionality can really sort of get in the way and create context switching where you're not going to get the work that you had planned and sort of researched and established done, because the customer commits will keep interrupting all of that. So the way Athena Health was able to solve that, the product team got together with the sales team and created that clear product development process to make sure they were avoiding those pain points. So they came up with a framework to really get those consistent processes for research and development, and making sure they were really clearly communicating the development progress to other functions. So you see here, they've got the discovery phase, so they were really clear in understanding. Sales team, we're here in validation and understanding mode. We're nowhere near selling. We're going to be experimenting, and we're going to be really clear with you. We're in experiment phase. You cannot sell this yet. When we get to alpha and beta, we will be very clear and let you know. So they had established that they would be able to sell to certain select clients in the alpha, and then a slightly wider pool in the beta stage. So they were able to avoid this sort of early pre-selling. And then, sales, they want to be able to have confidence in what they're selling as well too. So they were motivated to make sure everybody was on the same page in terms of, understanding the life cycle and, not giving false expectations with a prototype. So the process and practice is that's what's really driving the value of product at scale, right? So another aspect of product operations within processes is coaching and the PMs, the more junior PMs, and then developing standards, right? So this person could be providing agile coaching and making sure the teams are, holding up the way that they've decided to incorporate agile in a consistent way, coaching and developing PMs to make sure they've got a clear product mindset, and being consistent about experimentation toolkits and plans, roadmap and rollout plan coaching. We've worked with larger companies where they, probably 7 to 10 product lines, and everybody had a different process for road mapping. Everybody had a different template for road mapping, and everybody had a different way of expressing what was on the roadmap and what could be sold. So as each product team engaged with sales, they had to sort of start from the beginning and explain, okay, here's how we do this. Here's what this means on the roadmap. And that's just time wasted, that if you have those consistent processes, you can hit the ground. Everybody has sort of the ground rules, and they understand, if this is mentioned in the roadmap in Q2 and it says delivery, I can sell this. So, a little bit of work ahead of time creates a lot of leverage to get up to speed quickly in terms of go-to-market. And then, especially thinking about go-to-market and, cross-functional alignment, how to make sure that you're working the best way you can with sales and marketing and engineering. So a products lead might set the cadence of communication with the roadmaps to stakeholders, really setting those templates for rollout plans and making sure that the communications format and frequency is really clearly communicated to sales to support sales and stakeholders. And then this is huge too, OKRs. I'm not sure how many of you have incorporated those at your company. My last company I was at, they decided to bring someone that worked with John Doerr, who's written the book, Measure What Matters, into our company to help us understand how to create OKRs. It made sense. Every team created them, and then they got put away in a drawer. So it's like, that's great. We set these, but who's checking? And you don't want to check like every quarter and sort of understand that you've already missed that deadline or there's a blockage. Someone that is really looking at these OKRs and making sure that they're actually going as planned, or do we need to pivot? But OKRs, in my experience, I've seen that the maintenance of them is just as important as the creation, and a products lead can really help support that. So again, mentioning those types of standard templates. So what we always advise folks is like, making sure you've got roadmaps that are consistently done, product briefs or vision statements, your experiment findings, strategy reviews, release plans, and the go-to-market materials. So as I mentioned, just anyone in your organization should be able to understand and act on a template. A client that we worked with, sales had to learn how to work with each team, and it was really getting in the way of hitting revenue goals and a lot of frustration. So we coached them into a single go-to-market template and process, and even ownership. Sales and product marketing were unclear who owned what. So you're sort of setting the rules of engagement as well. So it really does help. So when you think about building and scaling a products function, where do you even start? So as you think about it, you've got your product leader, and maybe you're going to hire in a VP of product ops, and that's going to cut across numerous product sets, right? So your VP of product ops might have someone focused on data insights and customer and market insights and processes and practices, right? That's in a perfect world. But let's say that you're trying to introduce it at your own organization. How do you even get started, right? Where do you start? So what you want to do is focus on your biggest gap, right? So if you have a lack of visibility into your product performance and how the revenue is impacting your R&D costs, you'll want to focus on business data and insights first. If your high research costs and customers are complaining about frequency in terms of contacting them and interviewing them, I've already spoken to you 2 weeks ago, then maybe you want to focus on customer and market insights. And if you are finding that the cross-functional processes are inconsistent or broken and you're hearing a lot of complaints from your cross-functional colleagues, you might want to start with processes and practices. So think about hire. I see this as sort of two separate roles. If you can find someone who can do both, fantastic. Typically, these are different types of people, right? So one aspect of that is a data analyst. So someone that's really got experience crunching numbers. But not only that, but they're able to sort of pull the story out of those numbers and help craft a compelling narrative for you in a presentation form. We have discovered X. When I was at Cision, our product operations team discovered an opportunity based on customer feedback. We did a product test with a Wizard of Oz type of experiment. Melissa talks about that in her book, Escaping the Build Trap. So basically, we did we faked our way through this new product, and it was so successful. This test garnered $1 million in the first year. So we did make it a real product, but that really opened my eyes to how powerful that can be if you can find someone that can find almost the needle in the haystack, but even the more obvious things too to help you. And someone that's really good working across functions and teams to get data, someone that's sort of a, easy facilitator and helps, someone in finance understand why they want to share that data with you and how it helps everybody. On the other side, there's more of the process-focused person, someone that may be really steeped in Agile, has a really strong product mindset, loves getting into the process, very organized, and someone who loves coaching folks and mentoring them too. So you really need to think about where your needs are on the team. And if it's just you and you're trying to get this happening on your own, you can do it. You just need to focus on what's most important right now. So if you think about priorities, reducing bottom line costs, then you're going to want to have visibility into how every R&D dollar is spent, or euro. Increasing your top line growth, you want to see what your opportunities are for upselling into strong customer segments. If you're really focused on incorporating the voice of the customer, make sure you're really putting a process around the customer research to make smart product decisions. And if you want to come up with more consistency in the way that you work internally with the product team and with your cross-functional colleagues, make sure you've got those processes and tools set up to support the product team. So the important thing really is to think about that setting up product ops is really iterative. You're going to try, you might hit a brick wall, try again, but the whole point is just not one and done, as we say. You start somewhere and then continuously improve upon it. I have given you all a very high-level overview. I hope this was enough to get you excited about product operations and thinking about how it might help your company now and where the areas of need the biggest need are for you too. So thank you for letting me share this, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Denise. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. That was a lot of information in a very short time. So thank you very much for sharing it with us. It answered a lot of questions for me and for the audience, I'm sure. But it brought up some others. So we'll be happy to discuss them a little bit later. Guys, please remind to write your questions in the chat. So Federico and I will pick them up later. Make sure you write them there. And now it's time for Tami. Tami, you ready?
I'm ready. Can everyone see my screen?
I'm gonna plug in the screen, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. So hi, everyone. At Products Labs, we try to think about everything in terms of how it can help our clients escape the build trap. And what I want to communicate to you is that everything Denise just talked about with product operations really goes hand in hand with how you set up your product strategy for both your company and your individual product. And I'm going to delve into how product operations and other things can help you choose the right strategy, whether you're currently in feast or famine, as I like to say. And we'll get into why I mentioned feast or famine a little bit later. So this is me. I talked a little bit about my experience earlier. I love working with executives in product to help coach them to elevate their message across their organization. And a lot of that comes in the form of strategy deployment. And so when you're hearing me say the word product strategy a gazillion times, what does that make you think of? So if you could go into the chat, I'm going to switch over to the chat and I can see it. Hopefully you can see my screen. So what do you think it means when I say product strategy? I see there aren't that many of you watching, so I'm going to talk a little bit first then. So when I looked up product strategy across the web, these are different things. They come from Product Board and AHA and other well-respected sources. I think even one of these is from Silicon Valley Product Group. And so your strategy defines the direction of your product and what you want to achieve. On the bottom right, a product strategy is a high-level plan describing what a business hopes to accomplish with the product and how it plans to do so. So very often the word plan comes in here when it comes to talking about product strategy. But from Melissa's perspective and from our perspective, it's not about the plan for product strategy. It's about the focus and the mission and the direction and the intentionality of where you're trying to go. And so the way she defines it in the book is that product strategy is a system of achievable goals that work together to accomplish the mission and vision of the organization. And the mission and vision represent where you are going, and the strategy is the cohesive intent of the initiatives across the organization, which will help you get there. So product strategy is part of it, but sales strategy is part of it, and customer support strategy is part of it. And so are a variety, marketing strategy is part of it. So it's all part of the larger pieces that get to where you're going as a company. So we're going to learn a little bit about Netflix, something hopefully everyone is familiar with as a concept, if not actually a customer. And so when Netflix started, you may or may not know this because you're international, they actually started as a DVD delivery service. And their innovative idea was that you didn't have to pay late fees. So when you used to check out videos from Blockbuster or your local video store, very often you would forget to return it and there would be a late fee. And Netflix said, we don't need to do that. We'll just charge you one big membership fee and that'll be great. And so they had a lot of customers, 239,000 subscribers back in 1998. And Gib Biddle, who was their VP of product, his concept and his focus always was around delighting customers and making sure that the ways they were doing that were margin enhancing, meaning that they helped with the profitability of the company. They were hard to copy, meaning competitors could not easily do them. And at the same point, he was always worried about optimizing retention and cost. Because many of you probably know, getting a customer has a certain cost associated with it, also known as CAC or customer acquisition cost. And if you lose a customer and you have to get a new one, it's always more expensive to get a new one than it is to retain one. So if he could optimize retention, he could then make sure that the customers he was investing so much in getting would stay there. And so they had Netflix, and they called themselves Netflix because they knew they were not always going to be a DVD company. And what happened was they started seeing people watch videos on their laptops and on their computers, but people really wanted to watch it on their televisions. And so they realized that in order to get more customers, they needed to have their content available on more devices, and then also to provide more content. So they had teams working on more content, but when it came to more devices, they actually had a side project team that created the Roku. So for those of you who may own a Roku or are using it to watch television, it's a great device. Netflix actually invented it, and they were going to launch it. And last minute, the CEO pulled the plug and said, no, we can't do this. If we do this, we won't be able to make partnerships with other devices that are connected to televisions. And we need to be on those other devices so that we could have more customers and more content being consumed. And so he sold off Roku into its own company. And instead, he created a partnership with Xbox. And that partnership with Microsoft Xbox resulted in 1 million new users in the first year for Netflix, because Netflix was now available on your television through your Xbox. And what a great opportunity that was, because you already had an internet connected device in your Xbox, and now it was connected to your television, which was your big screen where you wanted to be watching the movies. And so another 1 million people said, yes, I want Netflix. That partnership led to other partnerships. They ended up getting a lot more content. And right now, Netflix has 182 million subscribers and is worth $194 billion as a company. And it was all about them saying, what's next? What's next for the company? Where are we trying to go? What do our customers need from us? And how can we be thinking strategically about the decisions we make, both in the sense of how do we serve our customers and how do we grow as a company? And so Melissa has this concept called the product kata. Kata is a repeatable process that was originally, it comes from the Toyota manufacturing process, but we use it for strategy deployment also. So if you think about your strategy, there's layers to it. You have your company mission, and then you have a vision, which is where you're trying to go in the next 3 to 5 years. I'm going to talk a lot about strategic intents in a second, and that is what business challenges are standing in the way of reaching our vision. So those are the strategic intents for the next year to 3 years. Then on a product level, there's the product initiatives, which are aligned with those strategic intents. So what problems can we as a product team solve that help us reach our strategic intent of serving more customers? And then there are options, right? Those are the things we talk about on our product teams. We want to do this. What is the best way to do it? And exploring those things. And so the product kata is a cycle. It's a scientific and systematic way to build better products. And it starts with understanding direction. The next step is analyzing the current state. Analyzing the current state is a lot of what Denise was just talking about with product operations. But a lot of people start there. You say, okay, what does our data currently look like? What can we do? As opposed to saying, what's important to the company right now? Where are we trying to go as a company? And then say, what's standing in our way with the data? So it's a shift for a lot of people because a lot of people start with the data and it's important. But first you have to be in the mindset of what is the vision of our company? What are the strategic intents of our company? Where are we trying to go? And then look at the data and say, which parts of this data are stopping us from getting there? And you can set your next goal on how to get there and a step to do that. And so what it ends up looking as this dual loop, where the senior leadership level is monitoring outcomes at a company and portfolio level, and a product team is monitoring outcomes at a product level. And both teams are trying to get those goals accomplished, but the goals are at a different level. And some are bigger and some are smaller, and that's the way this works. But the idea is that everything should have the intentionality of the strategic intents, of the company vision and company direction behind them. And so I want to talk a little bit about strategic intent. So I'm going to mention the word intent again and again, because I think that's really what Melissa added to the conversation around product strategy, the intentionality of it. So it needs to include a business challenge that or company level metric that you're hoping to improve. And that could be increasing TAM, SAM, adding new logos or revenue, improving retention, or increasing EBITDA, also known as profitability. The second part about it is that it needs to include the opportunity you intend on capturing. So who are you going to be increasing the TAM and SAM with? What segments are you going to serve? What problems are you going to solve? What markets will you dominate? Or what costs might you reduce? Denise talked earlier about customer support costs or onboarding costs, things like that, which might increase EBITDA if you reduce them. And then the last thing, and this gets to Fernando's question, is that the strategic intent needs to provide space for teams to generate options to accomplish it. It can't be prescriptive. It's not supposed to be a plan. It's supposed to be a framework that allows for teams to decide what should they do or not do. And so here are some examples. You can go up market into hospitals to increase TAM. You can offer a Spanish option to add new logos in Latin America, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you read through these, each of these have those three characteristics. They include the business challenge or company level metric. They include an opportunity you intend on capturing, but none of them are incredibly prescriptive as to what features the product team should be rolling out. And that's very important, giving that space while still helping focus a team. And so when strategic intents are deployed correctly, they're associated with company value and building company value. And they often fall into these three big categories: increasing revenue, protecting revenue, which is the retention stuff, or reducing or avoiding costs. And so when we looked at a variety of companies, and many more than the graphics that are on here, what we've really found is that successful companies deploy the right strategy at the right time. There are tons of strategies out there, and there's no playbook of what you and your company should do. That depends on where you're at. That depends on your mission and your vision, where you're trying to go. And the combination is what makes you be successful. If you can properly evaluate where you're trying to go, where you currently are, and how to bridge that gap, that is what success looks like. And so we came up with 16 product strategies for growth and the metrics that they impact. So these are all the different strategies we came up with. We looked at those companies. We looked at a variety of other companies, and I'm happy to share this. We also have it available online, but this is an updated version. And what you might notice is that there's a lot of things in the increased revenue category over here. And that's because increasing revenue as a strategic intent is pretty common. And so out of the 16 strategies, if they were grouped this way to make it a little bit easier for you to see, protecting revenue could be separated into improving retention or improving revenue per customer, so that's lifetime value. Similarly, avoiding or reducing costs could be separated into decreasing customer acquisition costs, CAC, which I mentioned earlier, or reducing support costs, like Denise mentioned. But really, a lot of things start with, we just need to make more money, because if we had more money, we'd probably be better off. And so making more money tends to come in the variety of either increasing your total available market, your serviceable available market, or your serviceable obtainable market. I think that should be serviceable addressable market. There's a typo there. But these three layers are what you should be thinking about. Does going to Latin America, does that increase our TAM or our SAM? Does adding this new feature increase our SOM or our SAM? And being able to articulate that to your VPs of product or to your CPO or to your CEO will help you get buy-in, because you're speaking in that business term to them that says, this is something that's important to you. You're trying to grow this for your company. By growing this, we'll be able to sell more of our product. And so those are things to know. And when you're thinking about any of the 16 strategies, it's always important to evaluate, should we be building, should we be buying, or should we be partnering? So a lot of them say build something, but they might as well say buy a company who does that, or partner with a company that does that. And so thinking about that whenever you're deploying a strategy is, are we the best people to build it? Is it faster to buy it? Could we partner with somebody else who might allow us to get to market faster, or have co-marketing or co-branding or co-sales that allow for us to really accelerate without having to hire a large number of additional people? Thinking about all of those things, partners that can service your customers, partners that can onboard your customers. Those are all different ways of getting to your overarching strategic intent of growth. And so the other thing you might have noticed in our 16 strategies, which I'll now read to you, is that there's a lot of them that there are multiple things that they check off. Individual strategies are rarely only effective in only one of these things of improving retention, reducing costs, et cetera. So when you're innovating to be best in breed, you're going to expand your SAM and SOM. You're probably going to improve retention. And when you improve retention, you often increase revenue per customer. And if you're really the best, you may reduce support costs, or you may not. We're leaving that one blank. That's kind of an open field. And so the other 16, whether it's going up market or down market, attacking new markets or verticals, expanding to new geographies, you can create a self-service channel which reduces your costs for onboarding. You can establish partner channels for different things like I just referred to. Or you could become an open platform, meaning you're providing APIs that other people use and they're building their products on top of. Or you could be a real platform like Salesforce's with the Force.com platform. There are lots of different strategies out there which allow for you to grow as a company. And the reason we put together these 16 isn't because we expect any company to be going through all 16 of these at once. But what we've learned is very often a company and their executive team or their product team chooses one of these in some sort of a board meeting, and they forget about exploring the other ones. Whatever gets mentioned first or by the hippo in the room ends up being the thing that gets implemented. And so by providing these 16, we hope people look at them and say, oh, actually, I didn't think about going down market. Maybe we should. Maybe that would be easier. Is there a competitor that we can merge with, right? Should we actually be sunsetting or selling a product line because it has incredibly low ROI and incredibly high maintenance costs? And those are the things that everybody should think about exploring, even if you don't go down that path, to enable proper strategy selection. Because choosing the right strategy is part of what the product kata is about. And number two is about analyzing your current state. So if you're choosing your direction, you know where you're trying to go, you also have to know where you are, right? If you were driving a car, there's the from and the to, same idea here. And that's where product operations comes in. So product operations, which Denise just really detailed, pulls everything together to provide cross-functional visibility and insights needed to define product winning strategies. And so when you have current data, you can define the right direction. And then the last thing to worry about is something called cost of delay. So is there urgency for you to get something out the door? And what is the risk of being later, right? And so here are some different options as to what's going on in your market, right? So that's also part of your current state that helps you understand if we delay something, what will the impact be on that potential ROI or revenue? And so the last thing I'm going to quickly go through is how do you know you have the right strategy, right? There are 16 of them out there, and it's possible we missed one. So please tell us which one we missed. It gets back to lean. So build, measure, learn is not only for products, it's also for the strategies. So thinking about defining your target customers, creating tests for your selected option, that's the target, and doing some lean MVP experiments, do a Wizard of Oz, do a survey, do something else that allows you to measure whether or not that's something that will resonate with your customers or your prospects. And the last thing is to review data. And you repeat that until you show some positive results. Because too many people say, okay, here is our strategy, go do it, without saying, okay, is this actually going to work? And you have the opportunity to take a step back and do that. And so my key takeaways for you are strategy should be based on the company vision and current state. There are many strategies out there to help you achieve your goals. Product operations and data is the way to key to setting a product strategy because it helps you understand your current state. And finally, be sure to test your strategy before you widely implement it. This is us. We're always here to help. And now we're ready for questions.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Tami. Bringing Denise back in. So yeah, that was an amazing talk. My head is buzzing.
Normally I do that as like a 3-hour workshop. So I was just like, how do I convert this into the 20-minute meetup option?
So yeah, that's beautiful. Do we want to start with the questions?
Sure.
Cool.
Let's jump in. I think that if Denise, you have to leave a little bit early. I mean, there was a question from Alberto, and he wants to know what is the overlap that product ops has, for example, between research, design. Is there any way to pull them all together or combine them all together to when you're deploying, for example, your product ops strategy?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I did a product operations workshop last week, and that was a really hot topic with some of the more mature product operations leaders. And it's almost like an arms race, right? You've got sales ops, you've got marketing ops, you've got design ops, and then product ops is kind of coming in a little bit after that. Where do we fit in, right? It's a matter of winning hearts and minds and helping them understand sort of the unique space that product operations sits in. And it's I think on product operations and you as a leader to help show, here's where all of you guys are filling in the blanks and all of the things that we need to know. Here are some things, some areas that we still don't have answers on, and here's how it will help sales and marketing and design. So highlighting for them that you're honoring what they do and understand the value that they're adding with their operations teams, fabulous. Here's what we need to do. And we're going to pull in all of the great insights you have created, but here's some ways it might help you as well. So not replacing, but enhancing. That's a short answer. I have a blog post I'm working on about that now. It's a good question.
Nice. I have a question. I don't know if this is related to that or not, but in one of your slides, you put a lot of things like you're integrating a lot of tools.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to ask a question from a project management perspective. I don't know if this is but how long does it take, for example, if you get, for example, into a large organization, which I imagine is normally what these people need help with?
Yeah.
I mean, how long does it take? I know that it depends. For example, if you're talking about sales and product, I mean, that might be takes a little bit less than if you, for example, integrating customer success, sales. But getting, for example, an idea of how long does it get to get everything up to speed, and you're getting the real data that you can make decisions and make decisions that impact, for example, either the product outcomes that you're looking for, or you're looking after, or some kind of customers or business outcomes.
Right. To quote that fabulous answer, it depends on the size of the company. But what you need to think about first is your priority and your biggest area of need, right? So you want to prioritize if you're really low on revenue insights. You want to prioritize that first. If you try to do everything at once, it's probably going to be a little messy. So I would suggest prioritizing where your biggest needs are first. And you mean in terms of automating, or just even getting these inputs in manually as well, Federica? Which was your question?
I was thinking in everything it's automatically done, so I don't have to
automated. Yeah. So in terms of getting it set up, if you go piece by piece, I think revenue can take. It depends on the kind of state that the source data is in. It could take anywhere from 1 week to 1.5 months. And it really just depends on the complexity. I think as you're bringing user research in, that's less complex. That should go more quickly. And depends on how you have it sort of atomized and parsed out. But I think if you looked at like the full view of that, it could take up to a year. It could be as fast as 3 months. It really depends on your organization, how well that data is coming in already. Typically, and Tami, you can chime in on this one, but the companies we work with on product operations are still sort of in the nascent stage of even getting that data in manually. So that's a lot of work to get that going.
And the only thing I would add there is something we always talk about with our companies is that you just have to get started.
Right.
Start somewhere. Say we want to see revenue by product because we can't currently see that.
Right.
We want to see churn by product. And it's not about having all of the answers. It's about starting to peel back the onion, taking a step in the right direction where you are now able to answer more questions than you were yesterday or the day before. And you might be able to have an entire team dedicated to this. It might just be one person, and that's okay too. But taking the step and saying, we want to be better than where we are right now is the first step.
And one way to look at it too, and Tami and I have been talking about this, is like, rather than I need revenue, but what are the questions you're trying to answer, and start there, as opposed to we got to have churn. Okay, what are you trying to answer there? So think about it that way, and that will help you naturally prioritize as well.
I asked this question because in my company I see that we have a lot of data for different sources, and I think that we, from one side, sales ops is giving out information from the ARR and these kind of things. The other people are looking at Pendo and saying, yeah, we are using 20%. People are using 20% that feature, but at some point you see different pieces of the puzzle, but those pieces are not linked together.
Right.
And I say, okay, what would be the first step that I could, take in order to start, getting some information about, as you were saying on the presentation, how, for example, this feature is, impacting the ARR or the MRR or whatever it is. Because otherwise, I think that we are not, looking at the whole picture,
right.
together.
Looking at it in different, separate views.
Exactly. Good.
Okay. I have one question, which I'm actually gonna pair up with Yeon's Kim's. When is the right moment to start with product ops? And what size does a company have to be in order to have its dedicated product ops team?
Right. It really depends on the size of the company, the maturity of the company, and how on board your product leader and your CEO is with this as well. And that's on you to sort of make the case in terms of here are some deficits. Here's sort of the outcomes we would get by having product operations. It can start by dedicating part of a resource that you have already and starting to show the value of it and saying, look how great this is. We could have even more if we had a dedicated person. So you can start that way. We're also working with a company right now that's sort of swinging for the fences, so to speak, going big and making the case to just hire someone right away. And they're thinking about like, what would that team look like after that? Luckily, this person has a really supportive CPO and is just sort of adding in the headcount and doesn't even feel like they've got to make the case. So that's unusual and lucky. Typically, we see companies that really have to sort of get in there. And as Alberto asked earlier, why do we need this? We have sales ops, we have marketing ops, and explaining that as well. So just making sure that you've got a really cogent, tight story around what the value is that product ops brings.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What we've seen in COVID, though, is that every growth stage company realizes they should have had product operations on. They wish that the initiatives were tagged with strategic intent so that they could understand, okay, we're shooting towards retention instead of new business. We don't care about cost reduction right now, or we do care about cost reduction. That they wish they'd be able to say, okay, this product has this ROI, right? These are the challenges we have with onboarding costs. If we cut half of our onboarding team, we're actually going to have a really big problem with retention, et cetera, and product operations yields that. And so it's one of our advisors says that like at this point, having product operations is almost becoming table stakes for a growth company or a scale up company. And it's a necessity, not it's a need, not a nice to have at this point in product terms.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what it feels is like product ops is, as you mentioned, a necessity that comes from aligning the organization around product mindset. In this case, around the sophistication of products, processes and data. What is a Trojan horse that you may recommend in order to convince other parts of the company that they may think, no, we're doing things correctly. I mean, we already have the information that we need in order to function. Why you come here to tell us how to do things? We're doing fine. How we may convince them or bring them on board? I'm thinking about
Are you talking about executives or coworkers?
Yeah.
Excuse me?
Are you talking about executives or coworkers?
Talking about departments, but they're spearheaded by their executives.
I mean, getting the buy-in from other departments. Yeah. It kind of harks back to what I mentioned earlier about showing the value that it adds, and that if you have all the other ops, these are the great things they bring. Here's what this brings, and this can impact sales in this way. And if those don't exist, there's going to be even more, I think, thirst to have that, because all you need to do is make the case that, hey, you're getting in financials, but you're not necessarily getting any context around that, and especially from a product point of view. At Cision, we would get monthly reports, and my product team would sort of put them into context. So one month we got a report and it showed volume was super high. We're like, cool. We're like, oh, the revenue is looking really bad. So it's like, obviously there's some discounting going on here. And so it also helps highlight processes within the organization. The sales team is sort of running their own promotional and product tests. They're like, hey, let's work together. Let's do this together. So, as you share these numbers and the CEO is going like, wait a minute, your team or you can sort of put the context layer over it in terms of what it means with a product lens. So I think it's usually a win-win. There are moments you will have when, engineering is like, wait a minute, we own Jira. Why do you need to maintain that now? And you don't have to have your fingers in everything in product ops. They can do that. Fantastic. We were talking with someone like, well, they own, engineering owns Jira now. Let them have it. You don't have to own every single tool. There are plenty of tools within, the product need that you can sort of enable if you need them. So it's really just about making the case that we're not stepping on your toes. We're not replacing you. We're enhancing and hopefully making more data, more accessible data, better data available to everybody.
And then if I can, add a specific comment, I think that it's also trying to take advantage of the opportunity. For example, the team that I'm part of, we have been contacted by customer success because they know, for example, that we're processing some kind of data that's indicated some sort of how the product was used at very high level, right? Very high level. But we have seen an opportunity there to try to provide the data that we have. They are using Gayside, of course, and we have provided data for them just to try to articulate the conversation. For example, where they're going to try to go and upsell, for example, a specific customer one of the modules, and they will have more tools to try to, create a conversation with the customer and say, hey, you're telling me that you're using this part of the product, but you're not using it. I mean, because we are seeing that on the data. So that, typical thing that customers don't like, right?
Right.
But that was the opportunity. I'm still trying to figure it out how to measure that, how to show, for example, the impact that could bring to the company. Mm-hmm. Although in terms of, for example, retention or more revenue based on the new modules that they're acquiring, but that could be an example. And then you can go from that. You can go also to sales ops to have Salesforce and say, hey, what this customer specific? What is the ARR for this customer? This one. So let's try to integrate that with the data that we have, so we can see, for example, which part of the product these customers are using. They are bringing more value. They are using more, the other part of the product. But I think it's take the opportunity, or for example, go directly and say, hey, customer success, what are you looking at when you have the conversations with the customers? And they're starting from that. I mean, at least that's what we are doing right now. But we are,
What we talk about when it comes to talking with the customer success people is to watch out for bias. There's a lot of recency bias that happens there. And so it's important to talk to them, but it's also important to look at the data and see similarly like where it is validated or not. And because there is a lot of bias there.
No, it becomes almost emotional too, because they're so connected with these customers and have so much empathy. It can almost overpower the cold data, the cold facts of the data. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, and I would say the other thing is that we worked with a company setting up their product operations. It took us like 4 weeks to get to the most basic baseline. And it was a new CPO. And when she came in, people said to her, we've got a retention problem. We have a lot of customers that are churning. Right. And then when we did the product operations for her, what we surfaced was that the companies that were churning, though customer service was getting cancellations, were happening in two varieties. Generally, they were in the small business where there wasn't very much revenue at stake. But that happened in two cases. One where it was involuntary churn, where those small businesses were actually going out of business. So it didn't have to do with anything product strategy-wise. And the second was that those small businesses were being acquired by larger businesses, which were either already customers, and therefore they were buying more seats, or to a competitor, which wasn't up to that company when they're being acquired as to which service they were going to use. And it turned out for their customers that weren't in either of those situations, they had very small retention and a lot of actually net revenue growth where seats were expanding. But it took us looking at the data, even though customer service was getting phone calls about cancellations, to say, this isn't a problem the product can solve.
Well, and sales may have known this too, but whether or not that's communicated over the product team, you might be spinning your wheels figuring this out and then eventually understanding, oh, this is sort of a natural turn.
Great. I think that we have another one that it's I don't know if you allow me, Pablo, but I would like to touch on this point because Frank is asking about how can you act when the company leadership doesn't have a clear, actionable strategy, and I think that it applies to both. I mean, a strategy per se, product strategy, and then also how do you articulate, product ops within your strategy?
So there's the question, like, I think that's two parts. Number one is, what do you do when your leadership isn't telling you where they want to go? Yes. That's like number one question. And I think
that's the question that I also wanted to ask.
That happens a lot. And so I think that it's a matter of managing up. So setting up your own product vision, setting up your own product statements, your charters and things like that, and saying to the VP of product or to the CEO or to the CPO or the CMO, whoever it is you're reporting to, and say, I think this is where we're trying to go as a company. Here's how my product fits in. And they will either say, oh, that's right on the money, or no, that isn't where we're trying to go as a company. So they might not be very good at articulating it, but chances are they have an idea in their head.
Right.
And so it's there somewhere. They might not be as good at deploying the strategy. So I think a lot of it can come from managing up. And it also can come from asking questions. What are the goals of this? Where are we trying to go to? Why is this important to our company? Can you show me how this connects with revenue growth? I want to better understand it so that I can make sure the decisions my team is making are correct, right? If someone isn't giving you a framework, ask questions that fill in that framework for you.
It's something to react to. And then on top of that, as you're having that conversation, here's how I got to this place based on the inputs that I got from revenue, from understanding all of our sales commits. So sort of backing it up with the data, and here's how we got here. Does this look right? And chances are, if they haven't given you sort of a top down, they'll be able to react at least from your bottoms up approach.
It's some sort of doing like reverse engineer, right? So giving all the pieces, try to put everything together and say, is this where we're going?
Yeah.
Or
it seems like we're taking these steps, which makes me think we're doing this.
Yeah.
On that basis, I can help, right?
Right.
This is how I think our team can help with that. Only to hear, yes, that is important, or no, that's not as important as something else.
Yeah.
And it's possible they didn't even realize that they made a decision that wasn't in line with their strategy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Is any other anti-pattern, for example, that you have, you might have found working with different clients, without mentioning anyone, but any other anti-patterns that you have, came across with other?
So I'm working with a company right now that a story, when Denise was saying something earlier, occurred to me. We're working, it made us laugh, but we couldn't laugh to the client. But we were working with raw financial data from the finance team. And we were comparing it to data that the product operations team had put into a looker. And the CPO got on the call and said, it's really important that the numbers in our system match the numbers that are coming from finance. Because I'm sick of going to the CFO and having the names, like the numbers not match up, because then we down in the numbers not matching up. And so the head of product operations said, I now understand that it's not just about trend lines, because in product, very often, as long as the trend is okay, we say, okay, it's good enough, the data's close enough, we're looking at a trend, we're looking at things like that, so it's okay. But when you're talking to other executives, your numbers have to match up, because otherwise they don't trust your trends anymore. Because if your numbers don't match up, how do I know what else is wrong with your data that might be causing the trends to be wrong? And so I think that's an anti-pattern we often see, where product operations spins up, but they don't make sure that their numbers align with other teams that may have been invested in the data for a little bit longer, whether that's the business intelligence team or the finance team or the sales operations team, really starting with something where the numbers can align to say, okay, at least we're starting with the same data set and the same rules for how we massage our data. Now we can add.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that to have a quarterly business review sort of devolve into, how did you get that? Where did you get that? You want to have all of that taken away and buy-in and consensus before. any of those types of meetings, and we see it a lot.
Yeah, I remember that the last episode that we did, we had John Cutler. One of the things that he recommends, working on Amplitude, he said that it's really good just to try to, a quick hack is to try to have data reviews once in a while, just to try to see, for example, how the things are going, and based on the data that we had at that moment, what were decisions that we made, and see, for example, how that is evolving. That could give you, for example, like a weak feedback loop to see, for example.
I think one of the other anti-patterns we see is that people, and this is common no matter how you're deploying your strategy, people set a metric, people set a goal, and then they roll out a feature and they don't monitor it. They say, oh, well, product takes 6 to 18 months to actually have the impact. What's the point of monitoring it? And you should be monitoring it, even if you're only going to look at it in 6 months. Like, put on your calendar, look over this data. Make sure we actually saw the bump we said we were going to, and then put that into your next QBR. Hey, we 6 months ago, 9 months ago, we rolled this out with the intention that in this sales cycle, we'd be able to improve our conversion rate for this kind of prospect. If you do it, there's a problem. Then you still haven't accomplished your goals. It gets back to outcomes over output, right? So that's a massive anti-pattern I see.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Go ahead, Pablo. I will shut up because otherwise I'm going to
start
throw different.
I'm going to try this feature and see if I can paste the comment in the screen. Yeah, that's
look at that.
Yeah,
nice.
Alex asked, how do you product kata on a program level, and how does it get integrated with product ops? He gets it at a product level, but not sure about the program level.
So I'm going to assume by program you mean like a portfolio, meaning a group of products.
I don't think so, yeah.
Yeah. Titles are different at every company, and so I want to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. And so the portfolio or the program level is similar to that company level. So that strategic intent at the company level. So in the same way you might have a vision statement for the company, you might have a vision statement for the portfolio, and then you might have a vision statement for the product. Similarly, you're setting company level strategic intents and then portfolio level strategic intents. So if the company wants to grow $10 million in ARR this year, the portfolio may be responsible for $8 million of that. And each individual product may be responsible for $2.5 million of that. So how are they going to do that is up to the product teams. But you say you're responsible for this slice. Or we're going to grow as a company $10 million, but you product team over here, you're actually just worried about retention. Because you have a retention problem, right? We've looked at the current state of our portfolio of products. These two are growing. This one might need to be sunsetted. This product might need to be have an improvement in the retention or a self-service channel. So you would actually look at the 16 strategies for each of the individual products as well as the overall portfolio. Because on a portfolio of products, you probably have a mix of those strategies based on the current state of each of the products. Because something we talk about a lot is that especially when a company has multiple products, they're at different stages of maturity, right? The early adopter versus the late mature adopter, all of those things happen. And you have to think clearly about each individual product within the portfolio and then the portfolio as a whole. How, like the portfolio level is the brand level. How recognizable are you as a brand? Can you cross-sell very easily? Can you upsell very easily? Things of that sort, right? And where are there strategies that are portfolio level? Can we become a best in suite, right? You can't become a best in suite if you only have one product. So it's harder to become a platform, all those things. So at a portfolio level, you think about certain strategies. And then in the individual product level, you say, what strategic intents can we set that help us accomplish that portfolio level strategy? What I would say, though, is that both company and portfolio level strategy shouldn't be done on a quarterly basis. That's too frequent to change. On a product level, it's very common to do, okay, our strategy for this quarter is this. This is what we're trying to get out. These are the features that we think are going to improve with those metrics. But on a portfolio level, it's better to either set that on a half a year or on an annual basis, because it just gets, people just can't switch gears that quickly and they can't be that nimble. Did I answer your question, Alex?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's happening. Okay, let me see how I can take this off. There we go. Okay.
Sorry, Pablo, I'm gonna ask a question so you can pull that, in front of that on my face,
You have to
show that skill. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I have a question. I hope it doesn't get too messy, but I can hear two different concepts when people discuss strategy. So here the one we've discussed was mainly about ways of achieving goals that I really like how they were put in those three pockets of more revenue, protect revenue, decrease costs. There are talks of the strategy like Gibson Gibbels, DHM, about how to incorporate characteristics in the product, or like Blue Ocean strategy, or like the Kano model, which are about positioning. It's about how do you define your product in such a way that it can compete in a market or create its own market. So I would like to know, how do they relate? Are different views on the same level? Do they belong one after the other? How do they feed into each other?
I think they're more like different lenses and different steps, right? Like, I think the blue ocean sort of, are you defining a new category, and that gets into like, are you increasing your TAM, right? And like, is that TAM totally unserved right now, right? Yeah. Are you entering something like that? So it's possible that you have an existing product that has served a particular group, and now you say, hey, we're going to shift into this new thing. There's this new market opportunity out there that was exposed. There was a change in the market conditions, et cetera. We think there's an opportunity here for us to take an existing product or a new product, but very often it's an existing product, apply it to something else. You've already validated it. You know that it works. You're now just switching where it works. And so this is an exact example of Blue Ocean, but it's in the same mindset, which is that Zendesk, we all know as a customer service platform, has recently transitioned into also servicing salespeople. They've said, hey, what does our platform really do? It's an email service, right? With tags and queues. And really, if salespeople had a similar thing going on for their prospects, that wouldn't be bad. And we're already integrated with Salesforce or with Soho or like Zoro or whatever the CRMs are. And so they're saying, hey, salespeople, you can use our tools too. So it's not a matter of Blue Ocean, because there's definitely a lot of tools for salespeople out there. I'm not like, it's not Blue Ocean in that way, but it's a very different TAM for Zendesk.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so that's one option. But also when you're starting out a company, right? Are we going to be creating something new? Are we going to be competing against something that already exists? Those are the sorts of questions you want to ask early on. And I think that comes back to like the company mission vision sort of stuff that you evaluate every 3 to 5 years, more than on a 1 year thing.
Absolutely. Super nice. Mm-mm-mm.
So I want to get back to something though. I think that like the big thing, like it took me a while to realize this after reading Melissa's book and actually teaching our strategy to a number of companies and I mentioned this earlier, but all of the different strategy things out there that different product leaders are talking about, they actually all fit together. They're rarely in conflict. And I think that the thing that Melissa really brought to the conversation is the concept of intentionality. The concept of saying, I need to think about what I'm doing. Does it fit within this framework, right? Are leaders deploying frameworks that people can fit into as a framework? And that like, whether it's we're going open ocean or we're going to compete against this particular company. One of my best friends worked for Salesforce in 2005. So back in the day where they still had to explain what the cloud was, right? And what was amazing that she taught me about Mark Benioff is that every person in the company, and she joined when there were already 1,000 people working at Salesforce. So it wasn't early days, but it's still early in comparison to where they are now. If you stopped any employee, independent of their role, they knew exactly where the company was going. Where are we going right now? This is where we're going. And that sense of cohesion is what allowed Salesforce to get to where they're going right now, right? We're developing this, which assists this goal we have as a company, this vision we have for the future of the world, which we're going to be a part of. When I was at JustWorks, there was a similar vibe where we were always worried about getting more lives on, right? We had 2 or 3 ways we were doing that. We were expanding geographically, but everyone knew at some point we were expanding to California. What did it take to get to California, to serve customer needs in California? Was something you were doing going to help that mission, or was it totally innocuous to that? And if it wasn't, maybe you should be working on something else. And so I think that whether you call it a North Star for the company, whether you call it a focal point, whether you call it a V2 mom or anything else, or a vision or a mission, what's important is that it's clear that the company members understand it and everyone knows where you're going.
I'm gonna try that tomorrow. I'm gonna ask any of the engineering managers that we have on the team and ask that question. I mean, I think I will be surprised by the answer, but
yeah, it's generally not as clear.
Yeah, I try to do that. I mean, there is another beautiful exercise, and I can bring him back again, John, in the conversation. Is the random ticket game, where you ask any of the developers to say, pick up one of the GR tickets and try to say, hey, what is this ticket, trying to accomplish? And then you are going level up until you get, for example, to the higher mission. But hopefully, supposedly, it should describe the strategy or the vision. But yeah.
We talk about that as the 5 whys exercise, where if anyone asks you, I was talking to one of the VPs of product yesterday, and he said, well, now that we're deploying our strategy, but there's still all of these needs that are coming in from customer support and professional services. And I said, have your team start asking them 5 whys. Why is this important? Why do we care about that, keeping that customer? And until they can say, this aligns with our corporate strategy to expand to the DACH market, unless they can trace it back, that probably isn't a priority, right? That's the bias of the most recent phone call they got on. That's somebody who yelled at them. That's their perspective, their individual perspective on what's important, because it isn't been being deployed from the top down as to where are we as a company going.
Yeah, and that is just, only that thing is difficult. I don't, imagine, for example, bringing all the insights from the data that you have and you can collect. That is even more difficult. So, yeah, I would say that the one of data for me is like a very thorny topic in terms of the thing how you collect, because what you're trying to do with data is to try to generate insights. I mean, data per se is useful, but if you don't generate information, insight that you can get some kind of action with that, I mean, yeah, it's data, it's there, but how useful is that for if you want to make any decision or going where is somewhere? So I'll say that if that is even more challenge. Do you normally, for example, when you go to an organization, do you work on both things at the same time? So a strategy and how data can feed the strategy or works as an input to define, for example, the strategy, or
we tend to be deployed to 2 different clients only because we're a small team. But what we often see is, first of all, what available, because Denise is equally capable of talking to a company about product strategy, and I'm equally capable of, it's more where our passions lie. And so Melissa tries to align us to our passions. But very often when I'm leading a product strategy engagement, we talk about the need for product operations as a part of how can you better inform your strategy. Or we do a little bit of a baseline in order to do that. And Denise, similarly, when she's working on the product operations manual baselines or otherwise, often gets into conversations around, okay, we noticed this trend. How should that be impacting your strategy?
Mm-hmm. That sounds amazing. Okay, so I think we're already running out of time. So yeah, we're gonna wrap it up for now. I'm just gonna say thank you again for sharing this time with us and sharing your knowledge and experience. Guys, make sure you check the Products Lab. I signed up on this newsletter ages ago. It's always great content over there. I have seen the 16 strategies there and a couple of the frameworks that you presented today. So yeah, amazing, valuable content over there as well.
Can I make a plug for one thing?
Absolutely.
If you, Denise mentioned this earlier, the CPO accelerator, if you are a VP of product and you're trying to level up to get to the boardroom, You're trying to learn how to talk to your CEO better. You're trying to learn how to work with the other C-suite better. You're trying to learn how to present yourself and to get onto projects in geographic expansion and market expansion and M&A activities that allow for you to elevate your career path towards that C-level. We do have the CPO Accelerator program. Classes start in September. It's an application-only program, and applications are due this Friday. So please, please, please go submit your application. It's not a very long thing. It talks about why you want to do it, where you're at in your career. There's only 15 or 20 people that will be accepted. Scholarships are available because we're trying to make sure that it's people from diverse backgrounds who don't always necessarily come from countries with GDPs that support the cost of the program. So please think about applying if you are in that category of somebody who's already a product leader and you're really looking to become a product executive.
That sounds perfect, guys. Make sure you check that, folks. And well, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Tami, Denise, it's been a pleasure. We appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Take care.
Bye. Have a great day, everybody.
You too. Bye.